Okay, folks, welcome to your training on how to vote in Michigan for the November 5th, 2024 general election. My name is Erin Lodes. I am the research manager with Engage Michigan, and we do a lot of election protection work in Michigan. So let's get started. So today we are going to cover who can vote, so who's eligible to vote in Michigan, and then also how to vote. We'll have some dates and deadlines thrown in there for certain things, and then we're also going to cover the canvass and certification process that happens after Election Day to make sure all of those votes are tabulated correctly. So who can vote? Start there. First up, you can vote in Michigan if you will be 18 or older on election day. You are a U.S. citizen and you've been a resident of a city or township in Michigan for at least 30 days. We're going to cover a few more details, dive into specific instances for folks as well, but these are the basics. So, can I vote if I'm a student? In Michigan, we have a lot of universities, including several big ones. I won't take sides here on this call. So students who meet these requirements can absolutely register to vote in Michigan, even if they're not from Michigan. So you can vote as a student in Michigan using your home or your school address. So if you are from Indiana and you're going to school in Michigan, you can use your your student address in Michigan to vote in Michigan. If you are from Michigan and you are going to school in Indiana, you can vote in Michigan using your home address in Michigan. I know all of that is pretty complicated, but it is all here on the screen as well. You can vote in Michigan if you were recently in jail or are in jail now if you are not currently serving a sentence in jail or prison. So you can vote if you have a felony or misdemeanor, or if you're on probation, or if you're awaiting arraignment trial or sentencing, whether you are in jail or not. You just cannot vote if you are currently serving a sentence. And then, some folks don't have access to stable housing, or they might be in places like a psychiatric hospital. And in Michigan, there are ways for those folks to vote. We are working to ensure that every eligible voter in Michigan is able to cast a ballot. All right, let's talk about how to vote in Michigan. In the last couple years in Michigan, we have gotten a variety of new ways that folks can vote. We have improved access to our ballot box due to a ballot initiative that was passed by voters in 2022 that improved people's access to the ballot by allowing early in-person voting, expanding absentee voting, and things like that. So we'll go through all of those details, but just FYI, if you used to know Michigan's election laws, things might be a bit different now. So, how to make sure you are ready to vote. The first thing that you have to do is make sure you are registered. The website michigan.gov/vote or mi.gov/vote is where you can find all of this info about how to register to vote. In Michigan, you can register to vote up until and including on election day. Okay, so there's a variety of different ways you can register to vote in Michigan, but this close to the election, so after October 22nd, voters who still need to register can do so by going to their city or township clerk's office, or if you're planning to vote at an early in-person site, which we'll talk about later, go to that early voting site. And at either of those places, you'll complete a registration application. You have to provide a proof of residency, document with your name and the address where you're living at either of those locations. So here are the ways that you can vote between now and when polls close on election day. So before election day, you can vote using an absentee ballot, or you can vote early in person at an early voting site. Or you can vote on election day using an absentee ballot or in person at your polling place, like we all know how to do. All right, so voting before election day using an absentee ballot. Okay, so if you're a Michigan voter who already has your absentee ballot because you already picked it up at your clerk's office or it was mailed to you as part of the absentee ballot registration list. Um, if you already have it, fill it out, vote it, follow all of the instructions, and make sure to sign the outside of that envelope with your official signature. There's arrows pointing at it, just don't forget. And then you can turn in your absentee ballot. If you do not already have your absentee ballot, to get an absentee ballot, you must go to your city or township clerk's office before November 4th at 4 p.m. Okay? So the day before election day, Monday at 4 p.m. And once you go to your city or township clerk's office, you will get and complete an application for an absentee ballot. You will receive your absentee ballot, of course, if nothing's wrong with your application, and then you can vote your absentee ballot. And again, you still have to sign the outside of that envelope. So, how to turn in your absentee ballot in either of those cases, you can drop it off at your city or township clerk's office, like actually go in and hand it to an election worker, or you can drop it in a secure drop box provided by your clerk. And you can find those drop boxes again by going to mi.gov/vote. Um, so that is everything you need to know about voting before election day using an absentee ballot. If you go to your clerk's office to pick up your apps to complete your application for an absentee ballot and get your absentee ballot, you can fill it out either at the clerk's office and just give it back to them then, or you can take it home, figure it out who you're voting for and what you're doing, and then take it back before 8 p.m. on election day. Okay, so here are just some quick absentee ballot FAQs. I'm not going to go too into detail here, but I do want to point out that in Michigan, you can track your absentee ballot. Go to mi.gov/vote, click your voter information. All the instructions are there, and you can actually see, if you dropped your ballot off at a drop box, you can see that the clerk has marked it as received once they handle all the processing. And then if you already have an absentee ballot, but you decide to vote in person, take your absentee ballot with you if you've, already filled it out and you just want to hand it in, or you can give your absentee ballot to the poll worker for whatever reason, and they can give you a new ballot to use if there's something wrong with your absentee ballot, for example. All right, so how do you vote in Michigan before election day in person without using an absentee ballot? So one of the things that the 2022 voting ballot initiative allowed for was early in-person voting. So the experience of early voting in person is very similar to when you go on election day to a polling location, um, and go through that process of voting in person. Um, the key thing to point out is that your community's early voting site is not necessarily the same as your usual polling location. A lot of communities have kind of combined their resources to host early voting sites. And so there may not be quite as many early voting sites as there are polling places on election day. So just go to mi.gov/vote, click on your voter information, and you can find out where your early voting place is. So you will vote early in person at an early voting site, exactly the same way that you do in a polling place. You will go in, you'll tell them who you are, you complete your ballot, you place it in a secrecy sleeve, and you feed it through the tabulator. All right. On to voting on election day. If you have not taken advantage of all of the different ways that you can vote in Michigan before election day, you obviously could still vote on election day in a couple different ways. So first of all, if you are not registered to vote and it is election day, you can still register to vote by going to your city or township clerk's office with proof of residency by 8 p.m. on election day. So then once you have registered, you can either vote using an absentee ballot at your clerk's office, or you can go to your polling place if you want to vote that way, if there is still. So voting on election day using an absentee ballot is essentially the same as voting before election day using an absentee ballot. Make sure that you fill out both sides of your ballot, make sure you sign the outside of that envelope, and make sure that you turn in your absentee ballot by 8 p.m. on election day to either your city or township clerk's office or a secure ballot drop box. And you can find locations of your ballot drop boxes by going to mi.gov/vote. All right. And so voting on election day at a polling place, this is the thing, that most of us would already know how to do. If you're already registered to vote where you live, you can vote at your assigned polling place between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. on election day. And if you are in line to vote before 8 p.m. on election day, stay in line because your polling place must stay open until everyone in line by 8 p.m. has voted. All right. So all of the voting has happened. The ballots have been counted. What happens next? So what happens is a process of checks and balances and just double checking math and paperwork. And that is the canvass and certification process that we use in Michigan. So first off, what happens when the polls close on election day? So these are the very detailed step-by-step that election workers steps that election workers have to take so that the chain of custody is maintained on all of the ballots. So that there have to be election inspectors involved in each of these processes, and they just take it one bit at a time until all of the appropriate paperwork is delivered to what's called a board of county canvassers. And then the canvass begins. So what is a board of county canvassers? So each of Michigan's 83 counties has what's called a board of county canvassers. This is a bipartisan board with 2 Republican canvassers and 2 Democratic canvassers. And then each county board is tasked with completing that county's canvass and certification process for the election. So what is the canvass and certification process? So this basically involves the county canvassers reviewing the precinct's poll book and statement of votes, correcting any mathematical errors, making sure all of the paperwork is in order, and tabulating any write-in votes. They record the votes cast for each candidate and for ballot proposals. And then they transmit those totals to the Board of State Canvassers, which then completes its canvass process and certifies both statewide and federal election results. The last bullet point here, the duty of these county boards of canvassers is clerical, ministerial, and non-discretionary, which is fancy legal speak for they have a very limited role in our certification process. It's a limited but very important role where they are double checking the math, they are checking the paperwork, and that is their job in the process of canvass and certification. So what happens if the Board of County Canvassers fails to certify an election? So county boards of canvassers must have certified their county elections within 14 days of election day. If a county board of canvassers refuses to do this for whatever reason, all of the materials that they would use to canvass and certify the election go to the Board of State Canvassers. Michigan has one Board of State Canvassers, obviously, with two Republicans and two Democrats. And then the Board of State Canvassers will complete that county canvass at the cost of the county. And then county canvassers who fail to certify an election may also be subject to criminal and civil penalties because they would have failed to perform their legal obligation to certify and canvass the election. All right, I know I threw a lot of info at you today, but here are all of the places that all of this information exists. So michigan.gov/vote or mi.gov/vote for your personal voter information, and michiganvoting.org has a lot of information on how to vote, who can vote, and what the certification process is, and then the election protection hotline, which all of the contact numbers for that you can see in the graphic on the right. And if folks have questions about voting, that is the first place you should send them. And that is all I have for you today.